everybody. Welcome back to Brewbound Frontlines, a weekly panel discussion with leaders from all across the beer industry as we navigate the tumultuous conditions the COVID-19 pandemic has wrought on the business. I'm Jess Infante, Brewbound reporter, coming to you from my home in Salem, Massachusetts, where I pretty much haven't left for about 8 weeks. Fortunately, my husband and I really like each other's company, so this hasn't been too bad. Plus, he's a high school history teacher and he's been conducting classes from home, so I get to learn things and then drive him absolutely crazy with incessant questions about the 1918 flu and the Great Depression. So, as you've noticed, our editor, Justin Kendall, isn't with us this week. So this week I am joined by a dear friend of Brewbound, host of the Selling Craft Beer podcast, Sean McNulty, who's joining us from his home in New York City. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Jess. How are you? Thanks for having me. For a long-time viewer, first-time co-moderator. So excited to be here.
Nice. Thank God you're here. I couldn't do it without you. So glad everybody's here with us this week. As you know, we're going to be talking with leaders from the Brewers Association and a few state guilds. Next week's topic is we're exploring what's going on in states that are beginning to reopen, and we have founders of breweries in Georgia and Missouri. So make sure you check us out next Thursday as well. But like I said, our guests today are leaders from the Brewers Association and State Craft Brewers Guilds, and they have been in near constant contact with their organization's members since all of this began. So we'll talk about what they're hearing from the beer industry's grassroots, what help is needed, and what the future of craft beer might look like. So welcome to our panel today, Paul Gatza, the Senior Vice President of the Brewers Association's Professional Brewing Division. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Sean and Jess. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Great.
Thanks for being here. We also have 3 state-level guild executive directors, and their states are home to a combined 1,614 craft breweries, which is massive. So first, let's say hi to Danielle D'Alessandro, the executive director of the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild. Hey, Danielle.
Hi, Jess. Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, thanks so much for being with us. Next up, we have Paul Leone, the executive director of the New York State Brewers Association. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Jess. Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for being here. Last but certainly not least, we have Tom McCormack, the executive director of the California Craft Brewers Association, home to the most breweries of any other state in the country. What's up, Tom?
Oh, home to a little over 1,000 breweries. Hi, Jess. Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. I know you guys are all extremely busy these days, so I've thanked you all profusely in the past 15 seconds, and I'm going to do it again. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us. I'd like to kick the conversation off by giving our audience a picture of what your respective states are like right now. So how has the call and email volume from your members been? How has it changed for you guys for, early, now in early May versus late March? How have things changed in that time? And what else has changed for your members? So Paul Leone, let's start with you, since New York is definitely the epicenter of the pandemic. What is life like right now for New York brewers?
Boy, life right now for New York brewers is probably the same as most other state brewers. It's just a ton of uncertainty right now. I think that, we're almost into our second month of a shutdown now, finishing our second month. So this all started off with the sky falling, shutdown. What are we going to do? And then we got some temporary privileges, and they're making do right now. And so working the loan system and doing everything they can to stay alive. And as a state guild, we're working every angle we can with the New York State government to make sure that breweries still have a pulse until we get through this, and that they can come back ultimately is the goal. And as a state guild, it's our job to kind of help them every way possible to get there. Great.
Tom, what's going on in California?
Well, similar to what Paul said in New York, things have settled down. Of course, it happened, the shutdown, the stay-at-home orders happened so quickly that there was a tremendous amount of confusion around that. It was very chaotic. So we were spending a lot of time trying to figure out exactly what it all meant and communicate that to our members. But, now things have settled down. Our members understand what is expected of them. We have really good rights and privileges here in California in terms of shipping beer to consumers within the state. And so there have been avenues for our members to generate some sales, which has been really good. in addition, of course, to those breweries that package and are able to sell to the grocery stores. So there are some breweries that have just completely ceased operations and just shut down for now, but most have stayed open. Most are still brewing beer, in most cases not as much as they were, but a lot are selling through the mail or shipping direct to the consumers within the state. And breweries that many have been very able to quite successful at that. So, and then there are some breweries as well. So I have to say it's probably not as bad as I initially thought it would be, and most of our members have been able to keep the lights on, but we still have a long ways to go.
Danielle, how are things in Illinois?
Yeah, I'll echo what both California and New York are experiencing. We were right behind California in Illinois to close bars and restaurants, or I should just say on-premise dining and consumption. We were also the second state right behind California to enter into a shelter in place through an executive order from the governor. So our breweries are hanging on. We've had some that have closed, that closed temporarily and reopened after receiving a PPP loan, and that funding certainly helped bring back some employees that had to be furloughed or laid off. And so we're starting to see, again, some breweries that might have closed temporarily reopen, but across the board, not only in Illinois, but across the country, the vast majority of our members, our brewery members, have had to, again, furlough staff, cut down on operations. They're doing a lot of delivery as well, curbside and to-go pickup. But it's certainly been challenging. And unfortunately, as we talk about the uncertainty, we really don't have a true end in sight right now. So that still remains. What happens when the federal money for those small businesses that have received loans, what happens when that runs out? And we still can't serve customers in on-premise situations.
Paul, is this lining up with everything that the BA is hearing on the national level?
It is, some new words and new business operations, words like to-go, drive-through, curbside delivery, direct-to-consumer shipping were not things we'd heard a whole lot about until the last 2 months. And additionally, there are also some market access challenges for brewers that are already in distribution, as retailers and wholesalers have narrowed the SKUs that are available in a lot of retail outlets. So that's been an issue we're hearing a little bit about. And we're also, with our national perspective, we're also working on a lot of the technical issues. We've heard for people look at, how do I shut down my draft system? And that'd be the thing that we would develop a resource for. So we're hearing beyond the government affairs side.
Lots going on. So thank you guys all for painting that picture for us. Just want to remind everybody watching at home that we can take your questions through text. So if there's anything you want us to ask the panel, you can shoot a text to 617-336-8560. And Sean and I will do our best to filter those through. So.
Great. And Paul Gatza. So today is May 7th. 1 month ago today, the BA released at least the survey that got the most amount of attention and press about what's the health of the United States brewery system, for lack of a better statement. 12% said they didn't see lasting beyond 4 weeks with the current conditions. Another 45% said they wouldn't last maybe 1 to 3 months. We're 1 month since that survey. Are we on the cusp of a lot of downturn in May coming into early June, or what's the sense that you're getting about how breweries have adapted, or have they found solutions in that time frame?
Some have found some solutions through some of the government programs, through the CARES Act, through the Payroll Protection Program, through the EIDL, the Disaster Loan Program. So that has at least provided a little bit of a lifeline for some of the brewers out there. We haven't surveyed within the past month. We're about to launch a new round of surveying. We need more than anecdotal information on whether some of these government affairs programs are working or if they're not really working for our members. The anecdotes range from quick, easy, and business saving access to this money, and others are still waiting to hear. They're just kind of on hold. And it's really going to be hard to tell how many will make it past those first 3 months. Brewers love telling us when they open up for business, and we can help start promoting them. But we're not really on their call list when they shut down. So it'll take a while for us to find out really how many are closing.
And on the state level, I know Paul and Tom certainly have done their own surveys. So you've had similar data come in on your end. So why don't we start with Tom, and just, what are you hearing in California in terms of, are you having more pressing conversations with some of your members now about we're not going to make it much longer, or have people found relief out in California?
Well, it's very mixed. Our survey didn't really address so much whether or not the brewery thought that they were going to stay open or not be able to make it. It was more around job loss and some of the economic impact that we wanted to demonstrate to the legislature to show what an impact it was to the state of California. But I talk to breweries, of course, every single day, quite a few, and like Paul said, people don't call me when they're closing. Typically, we are aware of about 3 or 4 breweries who, via social media platforms, have announced they've thrown the towel in. They've closed, they're not opening up. So those are the ones that have publicly announced it. I would imagine there's a few more than that. But for the most part, most of the breweries that I talk to are actually doing better than they thought that they would be able to do 4 or 6 weeks ago. So that's good news. And the concern that we have as a trade association, and I know a lot of our members have, is what this looks like coming out of it and in the long haul. And when I say the long haul, I mean 6, 12, 24 months down the road. It's going to be a very different world. And so we're beginning to have that conversations now. People are looking at really changing their business models and getting very creative, not just to keep the lights on now, but to have the lights on in a year and 2 from now.
Well, we're going on to Paul Leone. So along the lines of, how will the industry or the public know when we've had a lot of closures? I guess I'm hearing a lot of, we get a lot of the good news, not a lot of the bad news, but how is this, going to be tracked, whether that's in New York, and then maybe back over to Paul at the BA, just, what's the methodology? How will we know when we're in a real problem?
Yeah, I think, it's right. And I'll say it again a third time, that it's really tough to see who's closing. We had our survey showed, we did our survey 3 weeks ago, and it's already a little outdated. 2 breweries came back and said they weren't reopening. But it was blind, so we don't know who those 2 were. But since that time, I've had 4 breweries call me saying they're ready to open after this is over. So it's that ebb and flow that we're seeing. A couple have sold already or planning to sell to some other folks. And so I really don't know who is going to come out of this. None of us have a crystal ball at this point. Some have, early on, the sky was falling. And then with the temporary privileges of curbside and shipping and to go and home delivery, especially in New York City, where a lot of breweries have adapted well to home delivery. They're finding their way to survive at this point, which they didn't know or understand even a month ago. So we really just can't. It's so hard to forecast. We're going to do another survey again of the brewers just to get a snapshot here in the next week or 2, and we're also going to do a survey for consumers, because I think as states start to reopen, are the consumers going to be, not when they begin to reopen, they're going to have a certain amount of restrictions. And is it going to be 25% capacity, 50% capacity, or whatever it is? And, is the consumer even going to be ready to go out? The brewers need to know that. So I think surveys are a good tool for us to kind of understand the bigger picture, and we're going to continue with that.
Paul Gatza, do you want to chime in on that as well?
I do. We have a great resource at the association, our chief economist, Bart Watson, and he's been looking at some of the sales data and talking to a lot of brewers. And where he figures we're at right now since the pandemic started was on-site sales down 65%, draft beer sales down 95%, distribution for craft brewers, distributed sales in the off-premise up about 8%. All this collected results in craft brewers being down probably 25 to 30% in volume, sales volume, since the pandemic started. So it's that's a big hit.
Yeah. And Danielle, you have the latest news in terms of your governor just made an announcement about when that reopening may be possible. So fill us in on that, certainly about Illinois, and then also what are you hearing from your members at this point?
Sure, absolutely. We have only had about 2, at least, that I have seen publicly that have closed that have referenced COVID as one of the reasons, if not the main reason. What I do want to note, though, is that when we talk about the craft beer industry and in our small and independent breweries as being innovative and creative and nimble, we typically, or at least traditionally, have talked about that in terms of brands, different styles. But I want to say that, we're seeing that here during this pandemic, and how breweries have had to adapt. And so they've continued to be innovative. They've continued to be creative in the beer that they're making and how they're interacting with the consumer and getting that beer out to market. And so I think we're going to continue to see that resiliency, continue to see that innovation and even collaboration among breweries. And that, I think, is a positive thing. But it certainly is tough, particularly as it relates to your question, Sean. We don't actually know when bars and restaurants or on-premise will reopen. We have now a 5-phase approach to reopen Illinois. The reopening of bars and restaurants is not slated to occur until phase 4. We're currently in phase 2, and we will be in phase 2 until at least the end of this month, when the current executive order expires. So the earliest that any bar, restaurant, tap room, brew pub could reopen would be the end of June. The state is broken into 4 regions. That's based on public health regions. And so the governor's office and our public health officials will be reviewing healthcare data. There are certain metrics that have to be met in order for those regions and the state to move to the next phase. And there's always the possibility that we could move backwards. So if we get to phase 3 and there is an uptick in the number of cases and hospitalizations, we could move back to phase 2. So it really is anyone's guess. And so while we're not hearing, at least right now, of a lot of breweries and brew pubs that are considering permanent closure, that could change in a couple of months. So we're just not sure yet.
And I guess, Paul, your state certainly for New York, a similar tiered, I'm in New York City as well, a tiered approach to it, where they have 7 metrics, I think, to check off before any kind of opening, 25, 50, just opening your doors as possible. Is that kind of what New York is looking at? And we're on pause till the 15th, and then we're starting. That's where we're at, right?
Very, very similar to Illinois and what Danielle just spelled out. I mean, we're broken up by regions as well, and that's a little tricky too. We're just getting a lot of blowback from certain breweries, but we have to meet 7 phases. There's only 2 regions that are at 5 now, and so even when our stay-at-home order ends on the 15th of this month, we're not going to see, I think, breweries opening until June at the earliest, very limitedly, and then we just don't know what that looks like yet. So the problem with the phased approach is, and the Hudson Valley, for those that know New York State, that goes from New York City all the way up to Albany, that is one region. However, the lower Hudson Valley is one of the worst hit areas because it's right next to New York City, whereas the upper Hudson Valley has very few cases. And so when you lump a region in that, the brewers in the upper Hudson Valley are angry because they're like, we can open. Why are you lumping us in? So the government's trying to work through all of that as well. So it is chaotic. That's a great word right now. And I think the state government, we've got to hope that they're figuring it out. At least in New York, we're lucky that I know that they are. They've been very responsive to us, and we're very grateful for that. So we can pass that information off to the brewers.
And in the time in California, obviously even more geography and breweries to cover. So what's happening out there? And are you hearing pushback from some of your members now? Is that starting to become an anthem out there, or are people kind of generally still keeping the cool, so to speak?
There's a little bit of pushback. I mean, the diversity in the state is just amazing. We have Modoc County up in the Northeast that's about the same size geographically as Orange County, with a total of 9,000 residents and 0 cases, 0 cases throughout this entire time. So obviously they want to reopen. And then again, you have the Bay Area and LA area. Those are hot spots. But we are hopeful. The governor announced this week on Monday that we will be moving into our stage 2 tomorrow and allowing limited retail operations. So florists, shoe stores, any kind of retail store can reopen, obviously with restrictions, sales only as an example. But the governor has said that restaurants will be allowed to open during stage 2. We expect stage 2 to be a month or 2 in duration. We are hoping that restaurants will be opening sooner than later, but at this point, we just don't know when that is going to be. There are some counties in California that have opened up in complete defiance of the governor. We have 2 counties that have opened up their restaurants. So there's including brew pubs for sit-down dining. So and also pretty chaotic.
And then finally, Paul Gatza, there are still breweries in the country who are still fully operational. It's hard to think, we've been under, stay at home for a long time here in the Northeast, but there are still breweries who are operating at 100% capacity in the States, or is everybody, are there those businesses that still exist right now in the country?
I would say nobody is facing business as usual. Even the packaging breweries without tap rooms, they're still facing changing circumstances in the off-premise market, with the SKU rationalization and the limitations being put on there in terms of what's going to be carried. So they're facing a different competitive set. So nobody has no impacts. Some of the packaging brewers, though, they're doing quite well in distribution because people have been stocking up and they've been loading up on brands they trust. And so it's actually been an opportunity for some of them to succeed through this period.
We got a great audience question that came through. Somebody who had heard the BA's chief economist, Bart Watson, on a podcast today say overall craft volume is down 40%, which is huge. Also this morning, Anheuser-Busch had their first quarter earnings call, and things were, as you can imagine, pretty bleak. I want to say their global volumes were down 9.3%. Revenue was down 5.8%. US numbers weren't as quite that off. I want to say, well, I'll have a story up as soon as we're done here. But basically, the crux of this question is, how can any business survive that? That's huge. So, Paul Gatza, what are you guys thinking at the BA? What's the advice given to members?
We don't really provide advice to members. We try to provide facts and let them make their own decisions about their own circumstances. And really, everybody is in their own situation with their own circumstances. Some people have owned their own building and they don't have to think about the rent at a time when no customers can come in. So, but we just try to provide the information as it is, and try to provide the resources. Like if someone wants to get into changing their business model around and doing some direct-to-consumer shipping where it's legal, we provide resources on doing such things.
So that's a perfect dovetail into our next audience question, which is the BA able to help influence state governments to allow temporary to-go sales? How is the BA able to help beer sales at breweries, bars, and restaurants in more restrictive states? And I know you guys have been doing a lot of work on this end.
A lot of states have went ahead on their own and liberalized some of the way beer is getting to consumers, or some of the way beer drinkers are getting their beers by allowing to-go curbside delivery. And we're also noticing that it's not making a whole lot of sense to kind of put that genie back in the bottle. When we get to the back end of this, there's probably going to be a lot more capabilities for craft brewers to access the market in some of these creative ways. When it comes to, there have been several cases where we've helped the state guild by writing letters to the governors to make sure first that breweries were considered essential, and different paths to market that can help them. So we have helped in a few cases where beer was not really allowed to do a whole lot. Nevada is one place where we're still working on. In terms of direct to consumer shipping, That is largely a state-by-state issue, and we will support the states in doing that. The current project we have is developing an inventory of what each state is currently allowing, what their normal state of affairs is. In addition, we are in communication with one of the larger shipping companies in the country who is interested in this as a business opportunity. So I would expect to hear a lot more about direct-to-consumer shipping going forward.
Great. And Paul, while we're talking about government assistance, you know, the BA is the voice of craft beer on a federal level. We've had a few packages come through already in terms of a next round of stimulus support. What are your conversations with government officials, and what needs to be done next on a federal level, do you think, to keep craft beer culture and business alive?
Right now, we'll probably start hearing about the next package within the next couple of weeks, but we don't expect anything to be passed until June. Thus far, the government has not gotten too deep into the weeds in terms of providing support for individual, hospitality industry entities. So as time goes on, that's becoming a little harder. So there's a coalition of different associations representing different hospitality groups that are continuing to talk and continuing to work together on certain packages. One of the things we're asking for is workforce stabilization grants, multi-industry, a bit of a long shot, but it is something that a lot of people are involved with. We are asking for some changes to the PPP and the EIDL. That's the next round of surveying is going to help us inform that. But the timing of use, the timing of the payback for the loans that aren't forgiven. We're asking for full suspension of federal excise tax for 2020. And once we get past that, we're going to push hard on the Permanent Craft Beverage Modernization and Tax Reform Act. We're looking for tax credits for out-of-code beer. And we've done a good job of starting to build a coalition of 15 associations that go beyond beer that are interested in seeing that happen, including the National Restaurant Association. And another thing that isn't on a lot of radar screens right now is CO2 shortage that's coming. With ethanol plants shutting down all over the country, that's where a lot of the brewing grade CO2 comes from. And so we are hearing from individual members, and it's more of a regional thing, that the amount that they're going to get as well as the price are going to be changing going forward. And one thing that does not help brewers in this equation is all the attention being paid to the meat industry. It's used in food, CO2 is used in food production, it's used in water supply systems, it's used in medical systems. So where does brewing come on in that pecking order? Down toward the bottom. So that's a big one that we're following. We're working with the Compressed Gas Association and Vice President Pence's task force to try to make sure that there is sufficient CO2 in the country.
Great. And then Paul Leone, go to New York. Are you hearing anything about carbon dioxide in terms of the New York City brewer or New York State brewers? But then in terms of state government, Cuomo has been very outspoken about how in the whole the state is. So I don't know that financially it's going to be something that the state's going to be able to help out with. But what are you asking of the state to help the industry as well for New York? And then we'll pass around to California, Illinois.
I think New York, unfortunately, is in a situation. We started this year in a deficit. The state government did, and so when the pandemic hit, one of the first things we asked for was, this is the delay of the quarterly state taxes, which were due right when all of this started, and unfortunately, the state said, "Sorry, we can't. We need that money. We need that revenue." So, but they were relaxed in the sense that, like, if you can't make the payment, then you're not going to get fined or any of that. Just make it when you can. So it wasn't a situation where you had to pay it or you were going to be in trouble, sort of thing. So the state's been doing everything they can to work with us. The temporary privileges has been the lifeline. The shipping and the curbside and the home delivery. And if that right now is slated to go away May 15th for us when the executive order ends, because it was when the executive order was put in place, these privileges were put in place. So myself, our association, as well as the 3 other craft beverage associations, wines, spirits, and cider, are lobbying and pleading. Our associations are that please make this extended until this crisis is over, or until breweries can go back to 100% capacity, which really could mean the end of the year. Because, as I mentioned earlier, even if they were allowed to open up on May 16th, people aren't going to go rushing out to their breweries. They are going to need this to continue to survive. And if this is shut off in any way, you're going to see half of them shut down. But our state, with that said, our state has been really good at working with us and making sure brewers have what they need, because they're a $5.4 billion economic impact and 20,000 jobs in New York State. And we're very lucky to have a governor and legislators that totally get that the craft beverage industry. We have a very large wine industry here in New York State as well, and cider and spirits. So we're very fortunate to have their understanding, and we're confident that they'll find a way to let the brewers survive through this. So that's our big ask.
It's a week away that delivery could stop. So you're optimistic that it will get an extend, even if pause isn't extended?
We're writing emails and making phone calls. Yeah. And not sleeping well over it. So we're trying not to cause any panic, because the states always come through one way or another for us. And they did with the privileges. They literally, the Saturday before the shutdown, the shutdown was on a Monday. The Saturday before, the State Liquor Authority was reaching out saying, hey, what can we do? How can we help? And that's really kind of what we're lucky to have, that very lucky to have that in New York State. So we're confident that they'll continue to work with us to, not let these industries fail.
Well, if there's any problems, I'd say put the word out. I'm sure people will be more than happy to write their representatives about that one. Danielle, in Illinois, you've had a pretty hard fight to get a lot of these privileges. Walk us through what that relationship was like, and are these going to extend in Illinois as well, or where the state of that is at this point?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. I would say actually that the Brewers Association and there's actually a private group of staff from guilds across the country that are in regular communication. And so those shared resources and information have been really helpful during this time. And yet it's one of those things that where, even if other states are doing it and you can reference it, it doesn't mean that your state is going to say, oh, well, there's 20 other states that are doing this and I will hop on board. And so it really is, state by state basis. And so we're the ones as guilds on the front line and have the relationships with the folks that are in our governor's office and our liquor control agencies. And so I've been really appreciative of how responsive our governor's office and Liquor Control Commission have been throughout this process. That is true though. So we had our closure of bars and restaurants occur about a week before we started stay at home. And originally, breweries and brew pubs were not included in the license holders that were able to deliver. Either through a third-party service or with an employee. And so we worked with the governor's office to reverse that very quickly. And that's been critical for our small brewers. I think, kind of echoing some of the sentiment around, when bars and restaurants and breweries do reopen and do consumers want to go back, we're looking at national survey results or surveys that are being done in states that are starting to reopen. And we're seeing that same information that even when they do reopen at limited capacity, consumers are going to be hesitant to go out. What's interesting in Illinois too is, I talked a little bit about our phases and with bars and restaurants opening in phase 4, that will be at limited capacity. There will be other restrictions. We actually have face coverings when you're out in public, whether you're an employee or a consumer, all the way through phase 4. And even at phase 4, we are still right now limiting any gatherings of people to 50. And we don't move to phase 5, where you now allow any type of large gathering, a festival, an event, potentially 100% capacity of bars and restaurants, until we have an effective treatment, a cure, herd immunity, a combination of those where our elected officials in Illinois feel incredibly confident that we're not going to see a resurgence in new cases. And so that's going to be challenging then for our small breweries. Even if you have taproom capacity of even 200, and if you're at 50% occupancy, based on the plan right now, are you still only allowed to have 50 people or less when that reopening occurs? So there are definitely still questions to be answered, but we've appreciated how quickly, again, the governor's office has responded. We do not actually have shipping privileges right now in Illinois. That is only for wineries. And so we have made the request to the governor's office and the Liquor Control Commission to temporarily allow breweries and brew pubs to be able to ship intrastate. While delivery has been critical, we do have a lot of breweries, and this isn't unique to Illinois, but you do have Chicago, incredibly populated, and the surrounding suburbs. But as you get to central and southern Illinois, those are really much more tourist destinations. And so for breweries that are located in those areas, shipping is critical in order to get their product to consumers that want it, that can't get in their car and drive 3, 4, 5+ hours to visit these breweries for to-go orders. So still stuff to work on, but the delivery has been critical for our small breweries.
Is there an expiration date on that delivery, or is that maintaining for the time, status quo for a while? And what is your optimism on the shipping at this point?
I would like to say that I am incredibly optimistic on shipping, maybe in part because we just need things to feel positive about and optimistic about. Right now, we do not have our delivery in an executive order. It was guidance that was issued by our Liquor Control Commission while the shutdown for on-dining premise and consumption is in place. And so we actually are, just last week, met with a Senate working group in Illinois with a list of measures that will be really helpful kind of post-COVID, or at least once we get through to phase 4 and then beyond. But certainly keeping that delivery in place for breweries and brew pubs will be critical, and that's what we're asking for. So we're optimistic, hopefully, that can extend at least through the end of the year.
And Tom, in California, you be able to ship the whole time. Really, brewers just haven't done it. So what in California, have there been new privileges granted, and anything along those lines that you like to see extended at this point for California?
Well, we're lucky here in California because a lot of these privileges that other states have asked for on a temporary basis have already been put into place over the years. So we have unlimited self-distribution, unlimited curbside sales to go. A brewery can have an employee deliver beer to a customer's front door. We have shipping direct to consumer within the state. So all those things have been in place for quite a few years. And so the breweries are used to them and using them a lot more now, of course, and those have really been a lifeline because they were already in place. So a lot of breweries pivoted right away to implementing those, and I think that really, really helped. There were some temporary suspensions of ABC regulations, but none that really affected us too much. They were more around delivery hours to grocery stores, credit, being able to extend credit to retailers, et cetera. So we're really looking forward right now because, again, my concern is not just today, but looking forward 1 month, 6 months, 12 months. So I'm working directly with the California ABC right now to issue temporary suspensions on regulations that will make it easier for our members and restaurants and winery tasting rooms as well to do business. So things like able to expand your licensed premise so that you can have more people, set up tables in parking lots, courtyards, sidewalks, things of this nature. So those are the things that we're working on right now, and I hope to see those announced in the next week or two.
Great, thanks, Tom. And then Jess, want to go to the organizations themselves?
Sure. So, guys, your organizations exist on dues and events, and those are two really kind of up in the air things right now. Events, I'm sure it's going to be a while before they can come back, and dues, when your members are looking at losses of anywhere from 10 to 25% of them in the next 6 months. Have you started to map out a plan as to how to continue to exist? I know we talked a lot about this yesterday, and I know a lot of you guys have done some really innovative things, but Paul, Leone, let's start with you. You just did an event that you'll be hosting again in 2 weeks. So what did the Guild learn from that, and how are you approaching the Guild's future?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to all of my fellow Guild directors and the BA, because we do kind of get together in Zoom meetings and stuff during the week, and we talk a lot and share ideas, and it's a very collaborative group of people. And so a lot of state guilds did virtual beer festivals and things, and have been successful for several states. And we decided to take a little different tact because we could ship temporarily, and we did a virtual tasting experience. So you basically, for a ticket price, you would get beer shipped to your house, and you would get a 90 minutes Zoom session with your beer, with the brewers or with the owners. And it was a very intimate setting so that people could ask questions, go through the beers. They got brewery tours and things. And we sold that out in a week. And so that was, and people loved it. It was, it was really, we were lucky that it worked out the way that it did. But at this point, we're willing to try anything, because our festivals are canceled basically for the year. And that was a big income generator for us. We were already down 100,000 from canceling the conference, canceling a festival, all of that. So our very survival depends on being creative and innovative right now. And so we're working on that. We've got another 4 or 5 ideas to kind of utilize this new virtual world that we're living in. And I think that, hopefully we can get through the year, at least by doing these events. And if we can, generate the income needed to continue. And membership, membership is, we're not really counting on much for the end of the year. We made a conscious decision really to make, even non-members, keep them involved and play the long game, and hope that they realize the benefit of what their state Brewers Association does for them. And I know the BA has done the same. They basically have opened up to non-members. So hopefully, I said this early on, really as Guild directors, we created events, we did a lot of fundraising, and we were very focused on it. But it's situations like this is really why we exist, right? I mean, we're there for our members. And I think all of us, that's our sole job and focus, is to be there for them, for whatever they need, and so I'm just, I think all of us are doing the best we can right now and adapting.
Great. Danielle, I know you guys have been really creative with some really fun social media integrations. So what have you learned since you've been adapting this way, and what advice can you share for fellow Guild directors on that front?
Sure, absolutely. I've learned that I actually don't like social media or virtual programs any more than I did before. So that was lesson number 1 for me. But we don't always get to do the things that we enjoy doing. And so we adapt, just like this whole conversation has been about. So we did our first kind of online promotion virtual event. It was a statewide beer tasting happy hour. We let the individual breweries that signed up participate and host their own happy hour or virtual beer tasting with the owner or a brewer. And so we had a lot of success from that, but really to encourage consumers to go out and purchase from their local brewery and then participate in that happy hour, or again, beer tasting that was happening that evening, and that all took place on one night. We are actually tomorrow kicking off our Passport at Home campaign. The last few summers, we did a physical passport program where you would go to a participating brewery or brew pub location, you'd buy a beer, and you'd get a sticker, a passport sticker. And if you you collected a certain number of stickers, you would mail in your authorization page to us, and you were then, we gave you a complimentary year membership to our beer enthusiast program. Since we can't do a physical passport this summer, we decided to move it online. And so this Passport at Home campaign still encourages consumers to go out and visit the participating breweries and brew pubs, purchase beer, and then we actually have these cool passport frames. And so you take a picture of your purchase with the passport frame, you tag that onto social media, and then you're entered into a weekly drawing. And so we're doing that for about 4 weeks. And then we have another idea that we're planning to launch in July that we're really, really excited about. And that actually is going to be our first opportunity to raise money for our association. We would have had Craft Beer Week here in Illinois starting next Friday, and would have kicked off with one of our signature events, Beer Under Glass at a conservatory. So we're really bummed that we can't do that this year, but but again, have this idea in July that we're really excited about. So yeah, unfortunately, we're just we're coming to terms that with the idea we won't be able to host any festivals or events, in-person events this year. And those festivals are fundraisers for the work that our associations do, and are our primary revenue generators. And so we have to be creative on how we then plan for and get through to next year. And so I think when we talk about membership dues, that'll really be, I think, kind of a key metric or indicator on the health of the industry in each state. Our members able to, current members now able to rejoin. Do we extend memberships to non-members? But what we're hearing though is that we continue to be sometimes the very first source of information for a lot of our brewery members when everything is changing, the new information is coming out. And so we're going to continue to make sure that we're supporting our brewery members with education, with resources, and with promotion.
That's great. Now, Paul Gatza, I know the BA is almost in constant contact with guild leaders from across the country. So what are you hearing from other guilds and in terms of the health of them and chances for survival, but especially in states who might not have several hundred brewery members, and there's smaller states that don't even have a professional executive director. So what is the guild situation like outside of these states?
Looks like he's frozen.
Oh, he might be frozen.
Did he freeze on us? Okay.
That's okay. Okay, so moving on, we know the BA and nonprofit organization Bottle Share recently launched something called the Believe in Beer Fund. That's a fundraiser that is running now through May 17th, which would be the close of American Craft Beer Week. That's supposed to support guilds and breweries. Guys, have your guilds, have you shared the news about it? Are you considering applying? Tom, let's start with you.
We have not yet, but we are looking into it right now. Very interesting concept. So yeah, I'm optimistic about that.
Great. Paul, Leone, what about you guys?
Yeah, it's certainly something that we're gonna share. It's not something that we right now plan on drawing from. I think there's a lot of other state guilds in more need than us. Would rather take care of them first to make sure that they survive. We're fortunate right now, like with the number of members that we have and the support that we have right now. But it's a program that the BA is spearheading that is so worthy. So for sure, we're gonna share.
Great. Paul Leone, got a good audience question for you. Since some New York craft farm licenses are tied to using New York grown barley and hops, are New York barley growers planting this season?
They are. So the hop growers are the hops are going to come up anyway, and so they're gonna go ahead and they're gonna harvest as usual, and they're gonna grow as usual. In terms of the malting barley and the barley, yeah, there's a lot of experimentation going on regardless. So the farmers are going to continue planting the barley, the winter barley and the spring barley. And I think that the only challenge right now is with the lack of production, especially with all the farm breweries, is that we're going to have a glut of barley that needs to be malted or stored somewhere for these brewers to use. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But right now, yeah, the farm industry is going full.
Great. I mean, are there any other bright spots that you guys have heard? I do know of a friend of mine has a brewery up in Rochester, Chris Spinelli at Rock Brewing, took what was supposed to be a multi-month, multi-phase project and just did it all in one fell swoop since the tap room's closed. So in some ways, that's one good thing. Danielle, have you heard any similar kind of the silver lining success stories from your state?
Yeah, we actually have a few breweries that already have one location, and we're in the process of opening up a second location. And after talking with a few of those members, they're still moving forward with those plans. And this hasn't actually impacted them that much. And so, we've had a couple of breweries that one in particular that opened up maybe a week before everything shut down and stay at place went into effect, shelter in place went into effect. And so, breweries are doing okay. What I'll note too is that we've had a few breweries that are participating in this collaboration, this all in together. That a brewery in New York, actually, Paul. Half Day, I want to say, has organized with hundreds of breweries.
Other half.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do that sometimes. So with Other Half, And we have a few breweries in Illinois that are participating in that project that are all making the same beer. And a portion of those proceeds, each brewery gets to determine what organization or what effort they go to. And a few of our breweries have selected the Illinois Craft Brewers Guild as a charity of their choice, along with supporting their employees. And so that's been really impactful. And so I draw that back to the brewery that opened up like a week before the shutdown went into place. They're one of the breweries that want to give back to the guild because of the information and the resources that we've been able to provide. And if that doesn't make you feel good, I don't know what does. So we've been really appreciative of even just the support that our small breweries are giving back to the guild during this time.
That's great. So, got a question. Will we be recording this webcast? Yes, we will. It will be up. Don't worry. It'll be on next week's podcast too.
So I guess at this point, I know, Tom, you certainly spoke about this. This isn't a summer-long problem. This is a 6-month, 12-month, 18-month picture here. As in New York, the curve is bending and things are starting to come down. Other parts of the country are reopening without that curve, it's still going up. If you talk to your members about if there is a resurgence or a little bit of this is more of a wave than a up and a down, how to make plans and contingencies if there is another stay-at-home edict entered in kind of either August, or some people are talking about obviously the fall, a resurgence of the virus at some point. A lot of doctors are talking about that, the CDC. Are those conversations you're starting to have about how do you last not just the summer, but until possibly a year from now? And why don't we start with Tom?
Yes, on two fronts. One is, the last 6-7 weeks have been a bit of a practice run. So if we do get this resurgence and we have to dial back what's allowed for businesses to do and conduct out there, our members may have to go backwards and go back to what they are doing now. So, take note of what is working now and what isn't working now. But we're also preparing our members for the fact that, we're going to be going into a very deep recession, possibly a depression. People may not feel like going out as much. There's going to be high unemployment rate. So people may not be able to afford to go out as much. So really preparing people for the long haul, that when there's no light switch here, we're not going to just be able to open up brew pubs and brewery tasting rooms and go back to the way the world was in early March. That is over and gone. So preparing people for the long haul. And again, we have a lot of privileges that are already in place, like the direct shipping. So a lot of people have developed programs to deliver beer to their consumers, and online ordering and curbside sales. So we're going to just have to kind of get used to it and prepare to use a lot of these types of new sales methods for the long haul.
Yeah, and over to Paul, certainly that same kind of idea. But in terms of your roles as a guild, is it really starting to shift a bit to facilitating that information around, so that again, a lot's happened in a very short amount of time? Taking the learnings in from around your state and sharing them with all the members, is that kind of becoming a bigger priority for you? And if there's a resurgence, you have here are some best practices that you can put out there this time. What's some evidence to back it up?
Oh, me?
Yes, Paul.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it's such a great unknown at this point, everything is. And so, of course, obviously, we just want to be here for our members and get as much information and adapt as quickly, as much as we can. And not directly to your question, but I wanted to get this out before we run out of time a little bit. There are the unknowns that we, somebody mentioned the other day, like our distribution breweries, right? And we forget about, before all of this, we were always lamenting about, there's no more tap lines and there's no more shelf space and all of that. And that was already at capacity. But now, we're really talking about the breweries closing, but what about the bars and restaurants? And how many are those going to come back? And how many fewer tap lines are we going to be competing for our brewers and shelf space and so on? So the problem looks endless. You just hope that we can feed information to our brewers and help guide them if they need it, to be innovative right now and do everything they can to kind of adapt to the way things are, and also not be too doom and gloomy about things, right? This is not forever. Are things going to change? Most certainly, but this is not forever.
And then Danielle's out in Illinois. Certainly, is that something you're looking at as well? Is keeping that morale up in a certain sense and sharing the information? Has that been helpful for you, or what's kind of what conversations are you having about the longer term of the craft beer industry in Illinois?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we talk about or hearing that likely there will be a resurgence in cases and deaths in the fall, I think that's exactly what the governor's phased-in approach is trying to prevent. So really, right, limiting gatherings of more than 50 people until we get to phase 5 with no new cases, with a cure, with effective treatment. So really trying to prevent a resurgence of COVID come the fall and into the winter. But I think what everyone is saying is right. I actually don't think we'll go back to the way things were. And it actually reminds me that, I may be not as adaptable to change as I wanted to admit. I think change is hard, and we have to continue to be innovative to respond to that. We have hundreds of breweries that we're representing, and we want to make sure that they have all of the tools and the information to be successful, to continue to stay open, to continue to employ people and to pay taxes. And so, I think that even if we do see a number of breweries remain open, they'll be different, and they won't be able to bring back the same number of staff that they had before and that they were able to support before. And I think this also then is what's going to be interesting is to see how state legislatures respond to these small businesses once we come out of kind of the at least where we're at right now, but where everyone is in terms of still seeing cases increase or this flattening right now that's occurring. But once we get through that, how are legislators going to respond to these needs now that these small businesses are going to have? One of the conversations that we've had with legislators over the past couple of years is allowing brew pubs to be able to do limited self-distribution. Well, right now at a time where on-premise is closed and distributors are not picking up new brands and there is no shelf space, these brew pubs don't even have the opportunity to go down to a local grocer or a local convenience store where they might have a relationship and be able to sell their product directly to that retailer. And will legislators now be more willing to consider those types of measures where in the past they said, well, I don't know, three-tier system. Well, now we're seeing that by and large, we need the three-tier system does not work for small businesses in the U.S. In states across the country. And so how are elected officials going to adapt to support small businesses to be successful going forward?
Great point.
Paul Gatza, then. Oh, sorry, Tom, you have something else?
Well, just add real quick that the industry was evolving dramatically going into this. How quickly we forget that 2 months ago we were all talking about alternative beer products skyrocketing, and and the long tail struggling, and fewer openings, more closings. All those things were happening before this, and I think this crisis has really just accelerated that to a certain extent.
Yeah. And well, speaking of larger gatherings, so Paul Gatza, I think GABF is a looming question for some people. It's still 4 or 5 months out, but CBC was canceled, and what's the thinking at the BA right now? Is it still more of a wait and see, or what can you give people an update in terms of what GABF might be this year?
We recently surveyed our members specifically on GABF and their interest of attending, and from that survey, we're confident that at least the competition will take place. As of right now, we're moving forward with GABF plans as well as contingency plans with the knowledge that experts are learning more every day about the risks and the best ways for businesses to reopen and gather safely if that's possible. Right now, it's not looking good, but we're keeping our options open for now. Whatever happens, GABF will undoubtedly be different in the year 2020. Brewery registration is scheduled to open June 9th, so we've got some time. But big events it's a lot more complicated than just saying go or no go. There's contracts to look at and a lot of pieces to unravel. So if we can't do it, that's going to be a real bummer. If we can do it, I can't wait to see everybody.
Oh, good point. We're almost out of time, so I'm going to throw you guys each a question, 2 parts, and we'll go around the whole panel. So 1, what's keeping you up at night? And 2, what's giving you hope as you look ahead? So Paul Gatza, let's stay with you.
I generally have slept really well during this crisis, being at home a whole lot more. I'd say, honestly, it's crazy dreams get me up, and I have a hard time getting back to sleep. Of all the parts of our work that bother me, it's the guild health piece, the guild financial health piece that does, because lines around the country. So I'm really, that's the one that keeps me up at night.
Great. And what's giving you hope?
What gives me hope is that craft beer is so great. It's delicious and wonderful. And, there will still be demand for craft beer when we come out the other side of this. And I'm going to enjoy a whole lot of different craft beers when that happens.
Absolutely. Tom, what's keeping you up at night in California?
Oh man, the heartbreaking stories that I hear on a daily basis, people calling me up or emailing me and just saying, hey, we are just barely hanging on. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it. My house is on the line. I have a family to feed, and it's just really heartbreaking to hear those stories. So that's the hard part for me.
And what's giving you hope?
The amazing and tremendous response from our members. Going into this, as soon as it happened, we tore up our 2020 budget and redrafted a 2020-2021 budget, assuming that we would have 0 membership dues revenue coming in. But people have really stepped up to the plate. Our members, even though they're challenged on a day-to-day basis, and most are really going through a lot of struggle, they're sending checks for membership dues. A lot of them have handwritten notes. So the members have really stepped up to the plate, and that's really helped us. And that's been the bright light for me.
Good. Danielle, what's keeping you up in Illinois?
Yeah, I would say not only the ability for small breweries to remain open, but the ability for state guilds to continue to do what we do. So I'm thinking about even just the vendors that we work with. We have an associate director too that we employ, and has been an incredible asset to our organization. And so just ensuring that there is a guild that can remain viable and in place in this new norm, where we have to be more nimble and more creative on how we bring in revenue. So thinking about the people that even as a guild that we employ and that rely on that source of income. But what gives me hope, though, has actually been the consumer. I mean, just people across the state, and I know it's not unique to Illinois, but I'm going to specifically reference Illinois because that's the state we're in, but seeing just the consumers and the people that want to support their local businesses. We did a pre-sale for our event that would have taken place next week. And we had someone reach out that had purchased a ticket asking, are you doing a refund? And if so, I'm more than happy to donate a portion of the ticket price to the association. And so just people like that want to give back, that want to have a reason to go and support their local brewery and their local brew pub, want to make sure that they're still able to reopen when that time comes. And so it's been the consumer that has really given me just a lot of hope.
Great. Paul Leone, how about you? What's keeping you up at night?
I think I echo both of what Danielle and Tom and both said in terms of how dealing with their breweries. It's the stress level that I feel, that we feel as an association coming from the brewers every day. I mean, it's just that they're struggling. These are businesses that they put most of their life savings into and all of their passion into, and they're dying. And so that is hard to deal with. We can only do what we can do, so we do everything we can for them because that's what we're here for. So that's certainly what's keeping me up at night for sure, is that.
Awesome. And what's the bright spot for you?
The bright spot, I'm going to say, is the breweries themselves. The same ones that are struggling are also sending a lot of notes of thanks and keep doing what you're doing. It's helping. We're very lucky to have an extremely supportive board of directors who are letting us do a lot of what we want to do as a guild, and a great, state government that has always supported us. So there is possibilities ahead of us. It's not as doom and gloom as possible. And I think there were a few breweries that have posted record income days because they've innovated, to this new environment. So it's possible. And so that gives me hope.
Great. That's a great place to leave it. Thank you guys so much. Sean, couldn't have done this without you. Where can everybody find your podcast?
It's Selling Craft Beer on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Well, you know where podcasts are. You find me there. Selling Craft Beer. Check it out.
Fantastic. Guys, I can't thank you enough. You're such strong leaders in your states and nationally, and everybody I'm sure has really appreciated what you've had to say today. So thank you. Everybody watching at home, come back next week where we will be talking to brewery founders in Missouri and Georgia about what's happening with those states trying to reopen and what the mood is on the ground there. So thanks everybody. This was really good.